Monster of the Month Club. It's your friendly neighborhood mad scientist, me, Laura E. And in today's video, I am going to take you through the process of customizing my very own Kiki's Delivery Service doll. Stay tuned, and I'll be offering commentary over the course of the video. And if you have any questions or comments, be sure to let me know below.
So I had initially planned to do my entire work in progress for my Kiki's Delivery Service doll in one video, but unfortunately I kind of underestimated how much time it would take me to finish the doll and make the video and do all the editing. So you're gonna get an extra video next week with the thrilling conclusion, but you will see how far I got, which is pretty far on the doll itself. So that's the hardest part. After the clothes, I don't think making the accessories or anything will be too difficult. With that said, let's get started. So initially I tested my pattern on some scrap fabric I had, which ironically is the same fabric I'm going to use for the dress, but I made my pattern as you saw in the thrift haul video, if you check that out. I tested the pattern and now I'm testing it to see if it fits the way I want it to fit. So I'm tracing it out on fabric and I debated whether to test it or not. But in the end, I decided that was a good idea, and I'm glad I did because there were some kinks in the pattern that I needed to work out before I cut into the actual fabric. I traced it all out and I pinned it and I sewed it. I'm sewing it like you would a onesie garment. Normally, if you're sewing two pieces of fabric together, you'd flip the fabric in half, right sides together, and then trace the pattern on the back, pin it, and sew it together. But because the end result of this is more like a onesie, I ended up sewing the whole front piece together, the whole back piece together, and then sewing the front to the back. That's why I'm tracing the pattern multiple times rather than just tracing it once on a doubled up piece of fabric. I finished up the whole test piece and I trimmed it down, and luckily this is when I found out that around the thigh area, because the doll is so muscular in the thigh area, obviously because she's a supervillain, that it was a little tight and that the headpiece I had made that I thought initially was huge was not big enough. And I also discovered that in my haste and excitement to make the pattern, I had forgotten to put enough markings. So when I lined up the entire sewn front piece with the entire sewn back piece, I didn't have enough markers to line up the pattern in the best way. I went back and I redid my pattern. I made the whole leg bigger, I made the head bigger, and I put in all the necessary markings. And I redid the body piece because it was getting a little confusing with all the lines in there, and I thought it would just be cleaner for me to just redo the whole piece. I transferred the markings onto the back of the pattern as well, since I would be flipping over each piece for the fronts and the backs. Then I traced it onto my fabric. I sewed the legs to the body pieces first, the arms, or I think I did leg arm, one side and then the other. And then I pinned it in the front to the back, which was a sort of behemoth task, especially with such a thick fabric. But I was pretty brave and I sewed around all the edges and it turned out really well. Then I traced the headpiece onto the fabric, and since that was just a separate piece, I could use the folding over technique, just tracing it onto the one wrong side of the fabric and pinning it and sewing it together. So that was good. And I also did the ears on that same piece of fabric because they fit. I unpinned and trimmed around all the edges. Then I flipped it, which was easier than I thought, honestly, because sometimes when you're working with a bulky fabric, the turning right side out process can be difficult. But this time it was fairly easy. I didn't rip anything. Everything worked out. I lightly stuffed all the appendages. I still wanted her to have the ability to bend her knee, but the pattern was bigger than her body, which was my intention. So she basically has like a little fursuit on. Since her pattern was bigger, I didn't want the fabric to just hang loose. I wanted it to be more taut because she's supposed to be a cat, not a person in a suit. So I stuffed her legs, her body, and her arms, but I still wanted to not stuff her enough so she still had range of motion. So I think I did a pretty decent job at that. Then I sewed up the back after I had to take her arms out to stuff the ends of her arm pieces because they were so thin. I removed the fur that got caught up in the seams so it didn't look like a sewn garment and just looked like fur. And I sewed up the back. Then I stuffed the head with stuffing and attached the ears. Then I attached the head. And that's about as far as I got this time. So stay tuned for the thrilling conclusion.
Thanks so much for watching. If you like monsters, dolls, or fun crafts, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along on social media for all the creepy crawly fun. And until next time, stay spooky, friends!